Hello, wonderful people. It is so nice that you could join me again. Today is the 31st of December, so it is New Year's Eve. I'm actually filming this before that. That's okay. I am here to share with you my top 5 favourite books that I've read this year. I may have read other books that I really enjoyed, but these are just the top 5 that have really stuck with me. And I suppose one of them actually represents 3 books. I wonder if you can guess what that is. I've really enjoyed reading these books, and I'll share them. And then I actually thought I've got 5 books as well that I bought this year, fully intending to read and haven't read yet. But they're 5 books that I'm really looking forward to reading next year. But I bought them this year. So that's my plan. So I'm gonna get started, and this should come as no surprise. But The Eye of the World, and this actually represents the first 3 books in the Wheel of Time series, which I have read this year. Robert Jordan has created a universe that I think is absolutely fantastic. I'm loving being able to share them with people and talk about them, and just discover this world that I haven't discovered before. And it's been really fantastic being able to dive into that. And to the wonderful people who've been joining me as I read them, thank you. You've been amazing, and I love talking to you in the comments. So I'm hoping you're watching today. But that's probably my... I didn't want to include book 1, 2, and 3 because that would have taken up 3 or 5 spots. I could have done that, but this was the Wheel of Time. The first 3 books are some of the favourite books that I've read all year, and I'm really, really excited to read the rest of them next year. So that's the first one. The second one is part of a series. It was a new addition to a series that I started reading when I was in year 7 or 8, maybe year 9, so around early teenager. And if you haven't come across the work of Garth Nix, I highly recommend picking it up. While yes, they are technically young adult books, so if you're not into that, it may be difficult to sort of find the time or the interest. But I just think the world, the old kingdom that Garth Nix, who is an Australian fantasy author, the world he's created is incredible, and he just keeps adding more stories to it, and I love that. So this is Terciel and Eleanor, and it's a prequel. So it's the second prequel he's written to his first book, Sabriel. The first prequel he wrote was actually set quite a long time before, about characters that we learn more about in later books. This is actually about Sabriel's parents and how they meet, and it sets up the events of Sabriel, which I just think Sabriel was one of my favourite books. I've read it quite a few times. It's one of those books I revisit. It deals with necromancy and magic, and the Ember in waiting is Terciel, and later Sabriel, his daughter. And it's the person who protects the world from the dead. And it's just fantastic. And this is about how he meets Eleanor and how they fall in love, but also just how they deal with things. And it focuses a lot more on Eleanor than Terciel. And I really enjoyed getting to know Eleanor as a character. She is from Strait, which is below the wall, and the Old Kingdom is above the wall. So imagine the UK, similar sort of concept to Game of Thrones in a way, but not. So a wall, and above the wall is this magical kingdom, and below the wall is this real world, more like our world, where the further south you get, the less people believe that magic exists. And he started writing these books 27 or 28 years ago, he says. It is 27 or 28 years since I wrote the words, "The woman who had staggered into their forest camp was dead, only holding on to life long enough to pass it on to the baby at her side." And that is how Sabriel starts, and that is about Eleanor, Sabriel's mother. And so this tells us more. And I'm really, really hoping that Garth Nix writes a sequel to this, because it doesn't end. So I'm looking, that was one of my favorites that I read this year, and really, really happy that I had the chance to read it. The next book, not a fantasy book, but another Australian book. I think I've mentioned this in another video. I stumbled across this. I listened to it, but then I bought the book because I've gone back and I've had another read. I really enjoyed it. It took me by surprise. It was a free audio book from Audible. So I sort of just picked it on a whim and then started listening to it, and I'm so thrilled that I did. I think I picked it up. It was free for NAIDOC week, which is one of the weeks where we celebrate and remember Indigenous Australians, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders. So this after story by Larissa Benverend is story of a mother and daughter who go on holiday together. So they're Aboriginal, and Della, the mother, has grown up in poverty. She has grown up with not much, and then her daughter Jasmine is a lawyer, and a freshly graduated lawyer, and they go off to England together to visit it's a tour, a literary tour. So Jasmine loves to read, and they go to all these places around England that are associated with the authors that she loves. And Della is not much of a reader, and so it alternates chapters, tells the story from two different perspectives, and it is fascinating. It is both of them learning about each other as adults, and learning to embrace their culture, I suppose, looking at it through different eyes. And I really love just when Della will pay attention to the age of something, and then she'll jot down how old it is, and she'll be, oh, that's so old, but then she'll remember something her aunt or her grandmother or someone has told her about how old Australia is, and the culture that she is a part of actually is. And she does this comparison, but not in a judgmental way. And it's just absolutely beautiful. So if you're looking for something that's just a really lovely read, give it a go. After story. I loved it. Maybe I loved it a little bit because I actually have visited a lot of the locations, but it was more than just the fact that I knew where they were and what they were talking about. It was just a really good book and well worth giving a go if you're looking for something a little bit different. Now, the next book, I don't actually have, I listened to this as an audio book, so I will insert here. It is called The Bookish Life of Nina Hill by Abby Waxman, and it was just good fun. It's about a girl who likes to read. She works in a bookstore, and she discovers that she has family that she didn't know about. And it's her coming to terms with that, but it's also her coming to terms with just life in general. Really great fun. I'd classify it as that sort of rom-com style, chick lit. Really great. Loved listening to the audiobook too. So if I'm tossing up whether to read it or listen to the audio, I can highly recommend the audiobook. Maybe not something all the fantasy lovers will love out there, but still highly recommended by me. And the last book that I want to talk about of the favourite books that I read for this year, I actually don't have it with me either. My mum has borrowed it. I loan my mum books all the time, and sometimes I don't get them back for a while. But this book I picked up on a whim, and maybe I've talked about it in a video as well. I picked it up on a whim. I wanted to read something a little bit different. It's fantasy, but sort of that historical fantasy, so it could be set in our world, and it pulls on Jewish folklore, and it's set in Eastern Europe and during the Middle Ages. Sort of beautiful settings, beautiful writing. It's written as a fairy tale, and I haven't even told you what it's called. It's called The Light of the Midnight Stars by Rina Rossler, and I don't know what I was expecting. I picked this up thinking I want to read something different. This will be a good sort of in-between book, reading the Wheel of Time series, so I get to still read a new fantasy book, but don't have to invest in a whole new universe. And it was beautifully written. Like, it had that that pure magic of a fairy tale, but it was deep, thought-provoking, heartbreaking. Oh, just so much about it just hit me in the heart. I cried and it was beautiful. I really recommend it, especially if you are looking for that different kind of fantasy book. It's not like a lot of the other epic fantasies. It's definitely a fairy tale, but not fairy tale with necessarily your happy ending. Can I say that? It's not necessarily that kind of fairy tale. It's just got that feel of a fairy tale. So it's well worth giving it a read. So that is the 5 books that I've read this year that have really stuck with me. I could have probably listed other books that in the moment I thought were my favorites. Like, I really enjoyed quite a few books that I read this year, varying from fantasy to chick lit to sort of even some textbooks. I really enjoyed reading some of the ones that I read for uni this year. But these are the 5 books, or the 4 books plus The Wheel of Time, that have really stuck with me and I've thought about a lot since. So that's that list. And now really, really briefly, these are 5 books that I bought this year that I really hoped to read this year, but I will now be reading next year. The first book is called Illborn by Daniel T. Jackson, new author. I think this is a self-published book. I've actually started reading this. I've read the first probably 2 chapters. Really, really intrigued by it. Epic fantasy. And the first bit here: long ago, the Lord Aduel emerged from the deserts of the Holy Land, possessed with divine powers. He used these to forcibly unite the peoples of Angul before his ascension to heaven. It's definitely, from what I've read so far, it's got some Christian overtones, not necessarily Christian, but you can see that Daniel Jackson has drawn on some elements of Christianity and other things as well. Took me by surprise. The prologue, I think, was it a prologue? Yep, the prologue did not go the direction I thought it was going. I thought, oh, this is great. And then it just shifted, and I love it all the more for taking me by surprise like it did. So that one I'm looking forward to actually continuing to read. The second one I haven't read at all. I decided I'm going to put this off until after I finish Wheel of Time because I don't want to start another series, and it actually makes sense to read it after Wheel of Time, I think. It is The Final Empire, the first book in Mistborn, by Brandon Sanderson. Obviously he writes or finished off the Wheel of Time series, so I'll probably do what a lot of people do and start reading this after I finish Wheel of Time. So that's I'm not going to go into that. If you want to know more about Mistborn, there's so many other people have talked about that. And then The Ember Blade by Chris Wooding. This was, I think I saw another booktuber talking about it. A land under occupation, a legendary sword, a young man's journey to find his destiny. I mean, sounds awesome. So I'm looking forward to reading that one as well. Chris Wooding, everything I could possibly want in an epic fantasy novel. Well, of course I'm going to read that. So that one could take a little bit of time to read too. The problem is I was going to read these in between Wheel of Time, but I don't want to invest in series in between that might take me away from reading that. So I've been reading lighter books. The next one is another fantasy, but this is, I think, in the young adult genre. We Hunt the Flame. I've heard good things. I've heard mixed things, I suppose, about it. I bought this before I heard anything else. Is this the first one or the second one? We Free the Stars is the other book. So Hafsa Faisal. I am trying to read different authors and different cultures, and I heard that this was drawing on a different culture than that medieval English or European fantasy that's so common or has been common in the past. So I'm looking forward to reading something a little bit different. Zafira is the hunter, forced to disguise herself as a man. She risks everything to provide for her people. So I'm sure that's going to be pretty awesome. I did buy that. I actually bought this way back in the start of the year, and I still haven't got around to it. So hoping that will be one that I can finish in the first half of this year. And the last book, not a fantasy book, but just something that I've had sitting on my shelf for quite some time. Again, I think I bought this around the same time as We Hunt the Flame, so really early on in the year. Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. It's the Women's Prize for Fiction winner for 2020. I just think that this sounds fun. On a summer's day in 1596, not fun, that's not the right way to describe it. On a summer's day in 1596, a young girl in Stratford upon Avon takes to her bed with a sudden fever. Her twin brother Hamnet searches everywhere for help. Why is nobody at home? Their mother Agnes is over a mile away in the garden where she grows medicinal herbs. Their father is working in London. Neither parent knows that Hamnet will not survive the week. So I think this sounds fascinating. It's about Hamnet, and I believe, as far as I can tell, it's the son of Shakespeare. Yeah, I'm just double checking. Yes, Hamnet, I knew, was the son of Shakespeare, who did not live very until he was very old. And so I've been intrigued to read it. I'm super interested to see what it's like, and hopefully this will be one I can read again in the first half of this year. It should be a good one to read in between the Wheel of Time series as I go through. It's not epic fantasy, so it should be a lot easier to fit in. Anyway, that's just 5 books, 3 books here in this pile, but 5 books that I really, really loved for this year, and 5 books that I wish that I'd read. Anyway, that is me for the year. Happy New Year, everyone, and I will be back with more videos. I've got lots and lots planned now that I've finished my master's degree. I have lots more time up my sleeve, so I should be able to spend a little bit more time doing what I love most, reading and talking about it with you guys. So stay tuned. Make sure you subscribe, like the video, and comment down below. Have you read any of these, or have you got any recommendations of other books that I should read in between reading the Wheel of Time books as I go forward? Looking forward to hearing from you, and I will catch you soon. Bye.